Yes, it is live. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, like, Michael, if you wanted to.
Sure. I mean, basically, we did an intro to some of the key things we've been working on, just to give people who were there. There was a number of people who I think weren't as involved, so it was like a heads up, hopefully getting people interested. Then there was the deep dive you gave into the sort of formal async terminology formalization. I'd say the punchline from that, in my mind anyway, was that kind of says we should have a different model than async hooks, right? So we as a group probably need to figure out what that means, what next steps are from that perspective. And then there was a discussion about postmortem debugging, where there was kind of a proposal from Netflix, and we had a bunch of discussion. But in the end, and I think it would be good to get maybe Matthias to clarify, because it wasn't clear to me at the end what the next step was on that front. We had a discussion, but there were maybe some missing hooks, some missing pieces to make it workable. And so maybe the next step here in this meeting is for Matthias to kind of clarify if and what we think the next step is on that one.
So I summarized the outcome on a issue in the diagnostics repository. But in summary, we are going to try to use the unhandled rejection event that's already available on Node and try to withdraw from that, as well as introduce some extra information on the error object in V8. So we are going to open a request to V8 to add more data to the stack traces, so that we can inspect that on another node or another tool.
Right.
And in parallel, we are probably going to try to look to other approaches to debugging around promises, since it's not clear yet that postmortem is the best approach on this case.
Okay, and I guess, yeah, and then you got a summary on the issue too, which is good.
What was the what was the issue that you said you summarized this on?
Let me see. It's 245. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and then I think that just to sort of clarify, I think for and Andreas, you weren't there, Thomas, you weren't there. We've got a deck which sort of explains, like, at a conceptual level, some of the pieces that we would need to sort of track async context sort of holistically, right, and not in a way that's very sort of node specific, right, but how it sort of is well defined, integrates through the VM, and then is available across hosts, right? And sort of, and I think there's some additional kind of socialization that needs to happen. There's some additional work that needs to happen there. But I think that sort of, I think with, full awareness that what we have now is, nothing more than a set of slides. But I think if there's potential here, it sort of raises the question of, well, what is async hooks, and is async hooks necessary? And I think there's probably some use cases that require async hooks to still be there, but not necessary for async context tracking. And so I think given that, and I think given the uncertainty around it, it's sort of it's the kind of thing that it shouldn't yet come out of experimental. But we can talk more about that. I think there's an open issue on the agenda. I just wanted to clarify so that there's no confusion. Anything else about Summit that anybody wanted to add? Or sorry. No? Okay, so there's an issue open here. I'm going to close it. It is 229. So moving on, the diagnostics best practices guide, 211. Mike from NodeSource said he actually had written some stuff up on this. I don't know if he's on the call. I don't think so. But I think we need to find a way to move this forward. And I think the last time what we said is that we just need to at some point have maybe a separate meeting to kind of kick it off.
Yeah, and I believe Jarish volunteered to set up that meeting and start to hold those on a regular basis. He did ask me a few questions about how to do that, so I believe we should see him do that fairly soon.
Okay. Okay, so no other updates there. So the deep dives, I think, we did a deep dive on the async context stuff. I'm willing to do that again on a Hangouts or something. I think it'd probably be useful for folks who weren't there. Look for that. I think sometime maybe in the next few weeks, I could probably do it. I don't know if there's any other deep dive topics that anybody wants to discuss. Okay.
Yeah. Just wondering, the deep dives are going to be during these working group meetings, right?
Well, I mean, it tends to be, I think that we tend to generally have, an hour's worth of stuff that we discuss, maybe a little under that in these things. And so it's this question of, well, do we want to have a separate time? I think in the past, people set up separate times whenever we've done these.
I mean, I do feel like it should be a separate time, actually.
Okay. That's what I was thinking, but I mean, I'm open to suggestions. Okay. So anything else on the deep dive stuff?
And for the deep dives, I don't think it's very critical that it's at like any particular like good time, since it's kind of more like a thing that you'll just go back and watch on YouTube at some point or something like that. It's not really like a continuous conversation thing.
We don't need to worry about people in non-US time zones, is what you're saying.
Probably not.
Okay.
So what is the deep dive then?
Well, we have yet to schedule one.
What is it?
Sorry, what is it?
Yes.
Well, this was an open issue to discuss various things that we thought we needed to deep dive on, and so we just had an issue open just so we would come back periodically.
Okay, I'm just getting that there's no discussion because the time zone or the timing is not relevant.
Sorry, you're getting that what?
There's no discussion because that specific time is not relevant because you would just watch it on YouTube.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. Like, I think it's intended to be a presentation with more depth, which would be correct on that front. So you could go and, but I think we were hoping that after that there would then be discussion, right?
Yeah, I think how I interpreted Stephen's comment is more so that since it isn't an ongoing fixed time slot, we can be less sensitive with respect to the time. Not that there wouldn't be any discussion, and therefore we could have it whenever.
I think it would depend on who's interested in participating. The way I interpreted it was that it doesn't necessarily have to be this precise slot that we use for the diagnostic working, or it would be dependent on the topic and who's interested in participating, and whether we can find a mutually agreeable time or whoever wants to attend.
That's fair as well. Yeah, maybe that's the better way to think about it. But I think it's like for the async context stuff, like Andreas, I assume you're going to be interested in that. So I think we should try and find a time that works for you. I'd certainly like your feedback on the proposal. And so I think when we get to scheduling that and like thinking about my calendar between now and like the next 2 weeks. I don't feel like it's going to happen until then, but maybe next meeting 2 weeks from now, we can talk about what the like we can get that scheduled, and we can find a time that sort of works for folks in various places. So does that sound fair?
That sounds fine.
Okay, so number 157, expectation about tier support from diagnostic tools and VMs.
Yeah, I think that one is just a matter of still getting together to push things up the stack. I haven't had any time to think more about the next strategic steps on that front. I know there was a couple things that were moved up. So I guess for today, unless there's, I wouldn't say if somebody has something they want to talk about or a specific one, we could do that. Otherwise, it's a matter of us figuring out what's the next things we want to do to help support that. Is there more testing we need to get in the CI or so forth?
Sounds like there's really no clear updates here, and we should just pulse on it again next time. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay, so async hook stable API tracking issue number 124. Ali, you've been speaking to this one. You want to chime in?
I don't think there's any update this week. There was, the latest I hear is that I know is that there was some discussion of reviving the async resource availability on the async hooks APIs. This was Mateo's PR. And given that the HTTP parser may no longer be blocking, I don't know if Andreas has more to say about this. But yeah, that's the only update, I think.
We need to check the memory as well. So the initial model for async hooks was actually there was no destroy event. But then the memory performance of that was just horrendous. So that's why the destroy event was added. So it's not just a concern of the CPU piece, but also of the memory. That's the only thing I have to say. If that is no longer a problem, then I don't have a problem with somehow changing how the destroy hook works or how it exists.
Mateo's removing the destroy hook, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. Or at least somehow making it so optional that it doesn't interfere with performance.
But did he do it he did it for all of the async hooks, or was it just for promise hooks that he was trying to eliminate that?
It will be for all of them.
Okay.
For some of them, it will be quite cheap. But for promise hooks, it's very expensive because we need to wrap the promise object.
Okay.
And capture when its garbage collected. Yeah, so on that note, I made recently a pull request about removing the promise from the promise wrap. So that's a resource object you get. And this is something we talked about a long time ago, just got to it now. And the idea here is that will make escape analysis easier in the future, for example. So that could be a different solution to try and solve some of the expensive destroy hooks for promises. Yeah, but probably it's more difficult because it requires more initiative on V8 side.
Sorry, what requires more initiative on V8 side?
To use, for example, escape analysis to emit the destroy events more efficiently. Like right now, destroy events are not even emitted through promise hook. So that will be like the first step, and then after that, it would be to emit them more efficiently through the promise hook.
Okay.
That's a much longer path.
Yes. So one of the things we should do is, and we've been saying this, that Matteo, it would be good to have him and both Young in this meeting, and actually sort of getting together to talk about it in more depth, I think. And I think this time slot doesn't work. So maybe the best thing we can do is schedule like this, like a deep dive, and make sure the Matteo and Young can be there, and there is. So I'll take an action item to get this scheduled. I'll send out a doodle so that people who want to attend can.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
don't
all.
expect me to show up for this time slot.
What time is it there, Andreas?
It's 20 now.
Okay. And so if we moved it back an hour, because like at some point here, it's going to move.
Oh, it's just Wednesdays doesn't work for me.
Oh, Wednesdays doesn't work? Okay. Yeah, it feels like, I don't know. I don't have a solution to finding a time that works.
Yeah, so in this particular case, I think I'll just schedule a doodle for a deeper discussion on this topic, and figuring out a longer term sort of better time slot. I think that's a separate discussion.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we do have an issue open to move the meeting time slot because there are problems for a few people for sure.
Yeah, if somebody can pick up on that and like drive on it, like rock on.
Maybe I'm gonna ask Darish if he can you open a doodle to see if we can find a better, because I know he has trouble making this time. So I just asked if he can create a doodle to see if we can find a time that, or get, maybe not be better for everybody, but find one that gets a larger percentage of people be able to make it.
Okay. 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 Anything else on async hooks?
Related to the destroy hook, there was a bunch of conversation at the summit just about like the fact that async hooks currently like models like the resource concept as like both handles and other things that are not consumable resources, which is confusing, and that sort of results in like this destroy hook existing for promises when it doesn't actually logically really make sense, because like the only concept of destroy it would potentially apply to is garbage collection, which we don't actually care, like at least APM doesn't actually care about that. We just care about the data we're attaching to the thing disappears eventually, so we can just stick it on the object and let it be garbage collected on its own, which is kind of why there's that current resource pull request in the first place. It's like if we could better detach these concepts of the like tracking of handles from tracking of the like asynchronous context, like we wouldn't actually need destroy for context tracking at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's maybe like a good segue to sort of the next thing on the agenda, which is 107, which is this sort of formalization of async context stuff. So there's a deck that I presented at Summit. We're going to get that, I think, checked in to the diagnostics repository, maybe in like, I think PDF form. I think Ali, you said you were having some problems with it. Natalie pinged me yesterday about trying to sort of take some of those ideas and get an implementation, like a monkey patchable implementation for Node, with the caveats of where that's not going to work. And so I've been sort of trading some mails with her and Brian, is it? And just kind of like, hey, this is maybe what the shape of these things look like. So I don't know if you've had any more thinking on that, Natalie and or Brian.
Yeah, I mean, that was later last night, so I haven't had a chance to get too much into it yet. But I'm hoping that by the end of this week, should have some code down at least.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a sanity check. I actually tried to make something similar to this like a year ago using AST parsing, and the difficulties you describe in your email are the same ones that I ran into, like via exposing properties and like multi-wrapping, the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking with that, like, sort of maybe the, dumb thing to do at first is just to kind of copy all of the properties over from that original function so that you can expose them. Like if you were to just sort of look at all of the properties on the thing and then just copy them for now. And maybe that's not exactly the right thing to do, but I think at a minimum, it would unblock things so that people are able to be like, okay, I kind of see how these things are fitting together. And, it can be called out as like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't quite work. And I don't exactly know how if you implement that at like lower level of the stack, how that would exactly work. I'd have to talk with some people about that.
Yeah, another issue that I ran into is that it completely destroys triple equals checks of the function that you're wrapping.
So hopefully people don't do that too often.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and I wonder though, it's like if you, at some point, like, and so I think the question here is like if you say that, you continuify a function f, is the result of that triple equal to f? And I think the answer to that is no, right?
Yeah.
Like it should be no. And so, and I think that's okay, right?
I think so.
Yeah, it's just gonna break some of the libraries are gonna have to change if they actually use that logic.
Okay.
Yeah, because I guess there's somewhere like you can register a callback and then pass in that same one to just turn it off, like remove listener type of idea.
Yeah.
But since the libraries are going to have to change in order to use the API, it's not going to be that big of a problem. That logic can just change.
Yes, interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like let me know like if there's anything, like blocking you. It might be like an interesting thing to get like whatever code you guys are writing like on, GitHub somewhere so that people can actually kind of see it and poke holes in it. The other thing I don't know how we would do with just like if you were to try and solve it from monkey patching is get that whole ready context stuff set up. Because I think you need a hook into where the promise is getting resolved. And then you need to know kind of like the reactions that it's triggering. And I don't know, maybe you can.
Yeah. And we have various levels of promise instrumentation that we've worked with in the past. So we can just sort of take one of those, strip out our own logic and just try and paste it in. I think we can get pretty darn close.
Okay. But
yeah, a VM level 1 definitely would be better, but at the very least we can get close.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, awesome. Let us know like how it goes. I think it would be great to see like progress on this. I think a couple of other like points here. I think we're gonna sort of socialize this more with some folks on the V8 team. I've got to socialize it more with a couple people here on the Chakra team. And so like in particular, I'm curious as to like. I want to talk to like our JIT expert and have him poke holes in it. There's yeah, and then I think that I don't know, the next TC39 meeting is sometime in November. So if if we're at a point that we feel that it's positive. then we can sort of get to TC39. Ali, I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I was just giving people like an update, and we talked yesterday like about TC39 in November, and do we think that we'll have enough, we'll have the sort of the idea socialized enough then, so that we can be effective by going into TC39. You're not surprising a bunch of people. You've already got you effectively have support lined up. I don't know that all that's going to happen in the next, I don't know, month, maybe 5 weeks. But we'll see if it does. If it doesn't happen for November, I think the next one then is January, and maybe that's a better target for going through, starting the standards discussions around this.
Yeah, no, that sounds right.
Okay, so we'll do a PR of the deck into the diagnostics report for this one. Let's see what else. So trace event number 84. I don't know, Ali, I think you've been talking to that one. I don't know if you have any updates.
On trace event, there was some crashiness and some flakiness that's mostly fixed. There is one issue that was reported by someone. They were running on QEMU, where one of the tests seems to fail 1 in 500 times.
What were they running on?
QEMU, so it's a emulated virtualization environment. So there's most of the crashiness is solved. There's still some edge cases, I think. And all of these have to do with how threads in Node.js are initialized and how they interact with the tracing. There were some race conditions that I fixed in the past couple of weeks. So trace events is getting more mature. James is working on adding more instrumentation in various places. But one of the main things we want or need at this point is sort of more experimentation from folks in the community on what should be the default set of trace events that should be emitted by Node. Like what should be the baseline? What should you get if you don't specify any specific categories? And one of the other things that would be nice to have at this point is that maybe a benchmark that basically make sure we don't regress the default trace event performance. The idea would be that trace event should be usable in production, and it should be a finite, like we should have an idea of what overhead we want to have when trace event is enabled. Let's say we cap it at 2% or 1%, and then we would need a benchmark that makes sure that we stay within that, and we don't accidentally introduce significantly more tracing at the default levels.
So it seems like the benchmarking thing. Do you have any insight into what's going on with the benchmarking thing? Because I thought, I know that there were some folks talking about it in Vancouver, and I kind of feel like there's a pretty big gap in terms of where current benchmarking, the current benchmarks available for Node and where I think people would want to be. And I'm not sure if there's any sort of ongoing perf runs that happen. Are there?
Yes, but there's a working group that Michael can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a working group. It's not had a huge amount of, there's been a few people participating, so it's, like you say, we certainly don't have the coverage we'd like. We do run Acme Air and DCEIS along with a couple of other benchmarks nightly, and we have the charts on benchmarking.nodejs.org. They have on occasion found a few regressions, but I wouldn't be confident that they would cover all regressions. Certainly, there's no version of them that turns on tracing. That might be an option, but we'd need to figure out what would be a good regression benchmark that Ali outlined in terms of making sure we don't regress the performance on that front.
Okay.
You know, if we thought that like turning tracing on and running Acme Air was one of those, or DCIS, or, you know, one, I'm not sure we can turn on all the benchmarks and have a duplicate set, but if there was one we thought would have reasonable coverage, that might be a possibility, or maybe we need something completely different.
Yeah, I think as a starting point, like doing it for Acme Air, I think would be really good. We might also benefit from a micro benchmark in our benchmarking directory that basically is very focused. And I think that's a good starting point, those two things.
So yeah, so it wouldn't take too much. We just need a volunteer to look at the Acme Air one and come up with it should be pretty straightforward to have something that just changes the command line to add the tracing.
Right.
I wonder though, if like Acme Air is so old, and it's like, you know, you like James goes in and adds a bunch of stuff into HTTP2, and
we won't catch that at all. That is correct.
You know, and that's why it's sort of like there's a more sort of like holistic question, which is that like, how do you ensure that any given change isn't regressing performance, right?
And the answer is we wish we were doing more, but we're doing what the people we're doing as much as we can given the people who have come to participate on that front.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Jamie is Jamie Davis, who you might have seen at the conference.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's planning to spend a reasonable amount of time. I've also talking with the group at UNB that I work with, and they have somebody coming in January, so I might be able to get them to work with Jamie.
Okay.
But I don't think we're going to solve that bigger problem overnight. But if anybody's interested in helping, we'd certainly like more help on that front.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why I'd say at least the micro benchmark and choosing one of the existing ones would be the fastest path to something, if not the best, right? Because it doesn't require as much effort from people.
I agree with that. I just, yeah, I don't know. I have to, I guess, wrap my head around the fact that this is a volunteer organization, and you know, it is marshaling resources is not the same as in a non-volunteer organization, I guess. Right, because ideally you'd be in a place where it's like you've got a set of stuff and you're sure that, you know, your variance is at the right level, and then you say, oh, look, you know, Mike made a check-in and, you know, you just effed up performance in this area, and it's like in that level of maturity, and that's.
Well, I will agree, because that's exactly where, you know, I've come from, but over the years, this is the best we've managed to do so far.
Okay. All right, that's fair. Okay. All right, that was the last thing on the agenda. Is there anything else from anyone?
Do we want to talk about the meeting time at all right now?
We can.
It's number 235. It sounded like moving it earlier by an hour might have been slightly better.
The thing is like we're going to shift, like what do? You fall back. What does that mean? I have to always think about it, right? Like, but it's like daylight savings time is coming in, what, 2 weeks or something in the US, right? And I think
now that doesn't change the time for like India, I don't think, which is where Jarish has a challenge.
Well, but it ends up being that, you know, if we are, what is it, like -7 GMT now, we'll go to -8 GMT. Is that how it works? So I don't know what that means for India. What is India's like?
They don't have it at all, so they're just going to stay at the same time, right? So usually the calendars are set. Now that is a good point, that it may automatically move depending on who created the calendar entry.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like sometimes in the past it was like we said, well, it's 11 a.m. PST, and when PST shifts, then everybody else shifts whether or not you do the daylight savings thing or not. And then in some cases it was like, well, it was 11 a.m. PST and then something shifted and it moved to like whatever, noon or 10 or whatever it was, right?
Yeah, I think the broader community, it's like it's based in GMT, and then that's it.
So then we don't adjust the time based on whenever we've got our little daylight savings time. So as we fix a time in GMT, people's clocks move locally wherever they are, but the meeting is the same.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like for the TSC meetings, at least I know that's the way it is.
Okay.
And then the rest are probably, like I said, it depends on who created the entry in the calendar as to what happens by default.
Okay. I mean, are there times that like what's the best way to do this?
I know. I guess that's why I suggested Jarish could create a doodle. People can fill in when they think they can make it or not, right? And maybe we'll find something that's slightly better.
Okay.
Unless anybody else has a better suggestion.
Do we ever want to consider alternating? Like we do have people in like Asia that can't ever work in this time slot at all. It's like the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's the other good suggestion is, yeah, if you have two, at least then people can usually make one of the two, or TSC, we actually have three, so.
That's a good idea.
So then what would those times be?
The TSC one ends up being, currently it's like, for me, Eastern, it's 12, 5, and 8. It's 8 a.m., 12 a.m., well, maybe it's 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 5 p.m. Like, and those are spread out to be, like, 8 a.m. is 5 Pacific, so that's kind of like impossible Pacific time. 12 is like 9, so probably just in there. And then 5 is reasonable for Pacific. And then when you go the other way, 5 is 8 Middle Europe, a little bit later, going further east, at least east for me. And then, the 12 one is now in the middle of the afternoon for people in Europe. And it gives at least one during the working day for each of the different groups.
So you said 8, 12, and 5 Eastern.
Yeah.
And so that would be 5, 9, and 2 Pacific time.
Basically, a 12-hour offset from where we're at right now would be like early morning for Europe, like early evening for Asia.
When does the TSC meet?
It's, 9, which day or?
Well, yeah, which day?
It's Wednesdays.
We would need to make sure we're on a cycle that's not over.
Exactly. We could make a cycle, which is one of the other two. Like one off would do the trick.
Okay. And then so for the people on this call now, is that like, would something like that, like if you were to just say like all the yays say yay, all the nays say nay, which means everybody has to unmute yourself. We'll do a voice vote.
Yay.
Everybody has to do it at the same time.
1, 2, 3.
Wait, hold on. Not everybody's off mute.
Okay.
Real quick, what was the specific time again?
So 5, 9, and 2 Pacific time, 8, 12, and 8 a.m. noon, and 5 p.m. Eastern time.
I would have to see this in my own time.
Yeah, I think why don't we put it in the issue itself?
All right, no voice vote.
Yeah, thumbs up and thumbs down on a comment in the issue.
Fine, we'll do it.
I'm going to say it's 8, 12, and 5 EDT, which is going to be 5, 9, and 2 PDT. And so, like, you add, I think I add 5 to me, so that's 1, and 17 is 5, and 5 is 10. I don't know if I've got that right, but 1, 5. At 5, yeah. Okay, so I've just pasted that. Pasted that in the issue if people want to validate that that's right in their head, because I guess I didn't make that very clear. This is like, I don't know what GMT is, to be honest.
Greenwich Mean Time.
I just like, I know I'm 5 hours off of England, for example. So I just threw in what, for example, that would be.
Okay. There's like some bash script that'll actually spit it out for all of the different.
Yeah.
Okay. I tagged this with the agenda so we can pulse on it next time and see if we're making any progress. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? No? Okay. I think we're all done.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Have fun.
Bye.
Yeah.